You're listening to the SKYLIT Books podcast. We're an independent, general interest bookstore putting great reads in the hands of people in the Los Feliz neighborhood of Los Angeles. Hosted by resident Skylighters, we're here to bring you new and exciting author conversations, group reads, and bookseller chats. Happy listening. Hello, lovely listeners, and welcome back to the SKYLIT Books podcast. I'm your host, Natalie, and today we're so excited to welcome Brenda Lozano to talk about her new novel, Witches. Brenda Lozano is a fiction writer, essayist, and editor. Her books include All or Nothing, Loop, and a book of short stories, How Stones Think. In 2015, she was selected by Conaculta, the Hay Festival, and the British Council as one of Mexico's best fiction writers under 40. In 2017, she was added to the Bogota 39 list, a selection of the best fiction writers under 40 from across Latin America. Witches is her most recent novel. Thank you so much for being here, Brenda.
Thank you, Nat. I'm super excited, grateful, excited, happy, everything at the same time.
I'm so excited to talk to you about this book. It was so lovely and I enjoyed it so much. I read it so fast and then realized that it was something I was going to kind of think about and return to and like keep coming back to and start conversations with people about. So I'm going to read a few different passages as we chat, but do you want to give our listeners a little background as about what the story is and kind of set the scene for us?
Well, wow. I feel like I have to pack because I am very excited right now. I feel like I have to pack everything in a very short tweet, Well, first of all, thank you for being here with us, and thank you for your invitation. I'm very excited and grateful about it. So, well, before I started the book, even before it was a book and a manuscript, I was questioning many things, and especially I was very interested in answering through fiction the idea of a powerful woman. What is power today? And that question brought me to many different conclusions that of course brought more questions. And it is a very I think it's very important to rethink what many things are today, especially power and how, I was very interested in power, but not from a capitalistic point of view or from capitalism, but what is real power? Nothing to do with, with money, basically. So what is a powerful woman today now that, after Me Too and many other important movements have brought us many questions? I was wondering, what if power is elsewhere? I don't know why am I using right now that word so many times, but basically I came up to the idea of working in a fiction character that was a very proud woman of who she was, from an indigenous community that didn't speak an hegemonic language, not Spanish or English, but her own indigenous language. And she was a very powerful woman from language. I'm English is not my first language, so right now I'm trying to.
You're also speaking in a way that is similar, at least to how the book was translated into English, which is very flowy and stream of consciousness, which I made some notes about too. But and like you said, it raises as many questions, more questions than it answers, because there's so many things to think about with these ideas. So keep going.
Well, so yes, I was in Mexico, there was in the 70s this very well-known figure of a witch called Maria Sabina, and she did a lot of mushrooms, and it is said that many, you know, pop stars, actors, actresses, like many well-known people, came to this very tiny town in Mexico, in Oaxaca, to have these mushroom ceremonies. And it is said that Disney did Fantasia after this mushroom trip, and that Beatles came to Mexico. And of course, Aldous Huxley came to Mexico and did this trip and wrote The Doors of Perception after this trip. So I think this very, she didn't speak Spanish, and she only spoke Mazatec, and did this like very intimate mushroom ceremonies. So that was an inspiration, of course, but I was questioning what happens if nowadays with Instagram, Twitter, and this like in this very fast pace that we live in, what happens if we, let's say, see I'm trying to get the word as if I was like beating a piñata or something, like, you know? Where's the word? It's somewhere inside that big piñata. But I'm trying to say that yes, what happens if power is within us in language and not in money, basically, you know? So what if this character, that was one of my questions, what if this character like exists now, and I didn't want it to stick to history and to this like the story of Maria Sabina in the 70s, and you know, although it was at the beginning I was tempted to do it like that and to follow her steps and to recreate the 70s, which is a decade that I think it's amazing everywhere, you know. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to question this from the present, like again in Instagram, capitalism, selfie empire, you know, like likes say much about the value of a person, and you know, all these ideas that have to do a lot with patriarchy, capitalism, that and that are of course related, no? So what happens? The figure of a witch is very interesting in many ways, because for women, let's say from the patriarchal perspective, us women are of course sexualized, and our youth is valued over everything else in our culture. So we have to be sexy, we have to be young, we have to be successful. I don't know, there's many ideas around what a woman should be, and of course the idea of beauty and the idea of capitalism on how much you earn, how much you make, what do you do, and all these things, no? So the character of a witch, which is in a very interesting essay by Silvia Federici called Caliban and the Witch, like the idea of a woman who's not in that age, who is outside that capitalistic forms and mechanisms, and that's even in the margins of medicine, which is also a very historically masculinistic and patriarchal. See that, just to mention the vaccines now, no? Our periods were all messed up because the woman body is not the measure, no? It's the male body.
They never considered that.
Yeah, like,
because they weren't doing it.
You know, but they happen to menstruate. but we,
I guess, I mean, we'll talk about that afterwards. We'll figure that out afterwards.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, so medicine is also a very, yeah, historically it's a masculine job or a masculine profession, and herbal and all alternative medicine is more related or associated to women, of course, no, like doulas, witches, you know, in many ways there are many aspects that witches, or the idea of a witch or yeah, of someone who's not in those terms, or that's not participating in those areas, no. So I found that very interesting. Like, what if there is a super powerful woman that works with language, doesn't care about money, doesn't care about the hegemonic language, and doesn't care about, you know, many things that we are worried about in the cities and everything. So she seemed like, yeah, like my superhero. Like, it's amazing. It's like a dream, like someone who can heal things, think things, see things through language, and that's a very powerful thing, because she changes narratives. And I think today in politics, in a very violent context like it is in Mexico, like changing narratives is a very important thing. So from a political perspective, it was also important for me, like in a very personal way, to explore a character that could change that narrative of a white woman working in an office, being super successful, which is of course very important. But also it is important to think being an independent woman and rethinking power from another perspective. So that's basically, yeah, it was a lot of questions from feminism and how to think this, and yeah, and also how to have fun, because of course I live in a city and thinking of Feliciana, who's the main character and this super, I thought, like, Google in my imagination when I was doing it, I thought, like, I want this character to be like the type of character that you just Google and lots of pictures come from of her, like in very different situations, and like many people who do amazing things go and visit her, because there's of course many things that all of us search in language. And let's say that, like, imagine there's someone today that has a power of language, and that power means whatever you're searching for. So it's almost like a Marvel character, no, like a super powerful yeah, so something like that. I hope I didn't well, I hope I said something coherent.
Yes, no, absolutely. And I was just looking because I have a little a passage I was going to read, and part of that. So in talking about Feliciana in particular, I wanted to just Google her, and she talks about that too, because she says, you know, people came with their cameras and they found me and they took their pictures, and there were all these beautiful black and white photos of me smoking a cigarette, and all you see is the lit end of my cigarette. And these are the pictures they took back when they sort of made movies about her towards the end of the book and things like that. But I hadn't, in all of like the notes I took and the things I thought about, I hadn't used the word power at all, which I thought, which as you started using it, I found interesting, because I'm trying to figure out why I didn't use it as much. But I did, I feel like I just used other words instead of power that still equated or brought about the same idea, specifically with like her not speaking either Spanish or English. There, at first I thought it was a little stubborn, like choosing or making that choice to not engage with the people that were coming to her. But then when you used the word power, there's also that power and assurance of knowing who she is and what she's doing. And there's also, so I'm going to read two little passages where I wanted to talk about kind of that power of language. And language is used with a capital L in the English translation, which I really love. So two things I'll read. One is Feliciana talking about not charging people or taking money for her services. So she says, "No, I don't charge for my service. Someone like me doesn't charge for what they do. Politicians charge, liars charge, and fools charge double, as my grandfather Cosme used to always say. But you can't put a price in coins on knowledge, and knowing something is the same as seeing. And you don't take money for telling someone what you see, especially not in the service of God." And so I loved that. Definitely talks about that sort of capitalistic sense that you tried to remove her from. And people come and they offer her all these kinds of things, and she takes them and she says, you know, I still had a family and I had people that I needed to house and feed. So I accepted things from people. But when people came to be healed, healing and knowing the language and being able to see and carry it out to other people, that is beyond coin. That is beyond charging people. And that's never what this was about. And there's so much power in that, and knowing that you don't need that to do what you are supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Well, so first of all, I'm very happy to hear you, and you're being very generous for reading this. Thank you. But well, yes, of course. Well, the intention was not to write the word power. It's more that I was telling you a little bit more about what I was thinking when I was trying to figure out what was the way to get to that character and to write that story. So yes, at the end, of course, it has to do with a lot of other things, like, I don't know, rethinking the story is told in first person by two characters. No, Feliciana from in one hand is telling her own story, like how she grew up in this very tiny town in Mexico that I pictured somewhere in Oaxaca, in this fictional space called San Felipe. And well, of course, she gets married as a teenager and has children very, very young. And well, she has her own story.
Everyone can pick up a copy of Witches and read Feliciana's story.
But well, she doesn't speak Spanish or English. She's a very short person. And she's the first woman in a family of curanderos, of healers, but they're all male healers, and she's the first woman to do it. And she happens to be the first one to do it, like, a big thing, and something that makes, what she does is something that makes a lot of noise everywhere. And more in these times of, social media and everything. So she's very, very well known. I would say she's a famous person also, even though she doesn't care about that. And her, let's say her magic or her thing is language. She can really see things through her language ceremonies. So yes, I thought Maria Sabina worked with mushrooms, and and Feliciana, of course, works a little bit with herbs and mushrooms and everything, but she basically is focused in language, and that's her thing, no? That for me, that I write, and I think, I mean, I am an atheist. I don't go to church, but I read, and I find in poems many times something closer to a prayer, for example, or in a book something closer to a misa, to a like when people go to church, no? Mm-hmm. Like I find many things in books, many answers, many questions. I don't know. I can get very cheesy talking about how much I love books and how important books are for me. So Feliciana, working with language, I would say she's almost like a priestess, she's, I think the idea of someone like that is amazing. And by the other hand, there's this journalist that comes from Mexico City and has a baby and a partner and a very traditional family. And well, Feliciana's queer auntie, that was a he first and transitioned to a she, which is amazing because in before the word queer existed in Oaxaca, in El Istmo, which is a region there, like many decades and centuries ago, the word existed for naming this queerness, which is mushe. That's a word between genders. So, well, this mushe gets killed, which is a problem in Mexico. Like femicides is a very, very, very urgent and important problem happening in Mexico, where 11 women are killed daily just because, you know, they are women. So this journalist comes to cover the femicide of the mushe, and that's how these two women intertwine their stories and have a conversation, and questions like, how is violence in a city and in a small town, and how's an abuse, for example, how is growing up in a family, being a woman in these two very different spaces. Many of those questions I had when I was writing the manuscript, and these two characters helped me a lot to answer, at least in a very modest way, that is from fiction, which is not an absolute answer. Of course, it's the opposite. It's a very personal answer of how these things work and how we grow up with these things, from in different contexts. And so sorry, perhaps I opened this very, very much, but so these two characters, the journalist and the curandera, helped me to of course, the journalist also works with words and with justice, and she has of course a feminist perspective in the journal the newspaper where she works. So these two women working with words with two very different contexts, and of course results of their work, and I think they build up a story that, at least from my very personal perspective of working in the book and working in this story, helped me to answer many of these questions that I had, like, how is growing up like this, and how can it be in this context, and how can it be in this other context, from the urban perspective or the rural perspective, all these questions.
And you mentioned how, because you're asking and answering those questions in fiction rather than nonfiction, the answers are a little more modest, or not as kind of like set in fact, but I think the beauty of fiction specifically, and you said that you got to sort of ask and answer yourself those questions while you were writing, but the beauty of fiction and language in that way, and a lot of poetry too, like you mentioned, is that it offers a space for you to ask those questions. It sort of creates a safe space where things aren't like make believe or imaginary, but it's a space where you allow yourself the room to ask hard questions or figure out or work through ideas. And that's something that I loved about the way that all of these stories connected to, because there was sort of, with all the different characters, so Feliciana, and then Zoe, who is our journalist, and then Gaspar, Paloma as well. I think I have another passage here, because they sort of, there's a lineage to all of them, with the idea that as women, their histories are all connected as well. And the power that whoever came before you has is also yours. And once you're able to find it and hold on to it, what are you going to do with it? And how are you going to tell your story?
Yeah.
And so let's see, so when there's a certain point where Feliciana is looking at Paloma and wants to call her Gaspar, because she's sort of just seeing her in a certain way, and she thinks that will be a compliment or something, seeing her at her, like, her barest level of self. And Paloma tells her, like, no, she doesn't get upset, but she says, like, you don't have to call me that. That is not who I am. I am Paloma. And that person is, like, that tastes bad in my mouth, almost, saying that. And so once that sort of happens, Feliciana is at a certain point needs Paloma's help and goes to her, and Paloma has sort of like had this shift, or Feliciana is noticing it for the first time, that Paloma has changed and now knows who she is. And so Feliciana says, but in this emergency, she was the only person who could help me, and she had left the path of healing, and nothing could bring her back, because she had found her true path, and it wasn't that of the curandero, it was her path as Paloma. And when I saw her there flying, offering joy to the eyes of all who saw her gentle white flapping, like she flapped her eyes when she put on her shine. When I saw Paloma flying, I felt more alone in the world than ever before. Yeah. And that, I loved that so much, because a lot of times when you have a teacher or someone who has shown you so much, even if it's not like a teacher, like Paloma was her auntie, like you said, and was a family member, someone close to you, who then all of a sudden shifts in a way that you are not shifting, it can feel like a grief in some way. You can feel extremely alone like that. And even though they were closer than ever before, kind of coming into their own senses of power and understanding themselves in their own ways, because Feliciana felt like it wasn't the same way, because she had always known Paloma as a healer. She was always a healer. And when Paloma didn't necessarily need that anymore, Feliciana felt so alone.
Yeah, well, thank you for reading that. I think Heather, the translator, did an amazing work, and every time I hear that out loud what she did, I'm always amazed of how she did it. Okay, so, well, I think fiction is a space for freedom, like in the most elastic and vast way of seeing it. Like, I think that's a space. The arts have many spaces, of course, but this is mine. And I think that, yeah, fiction gives you that freedom of going exactly where you want. Well, no, you don't go where you want. You sometimes get where your work takes you, or where that freedom is taking you. It's more about the process than getting somewhere, no? So yeah, actually sorry, it might seem that I'm not getting to what you just said, but I'm getting there.
No, yeah.
I think it's more about the process, no? About thinking, enjoying what you do. The other day someone asked me, like, if you're writing about, because still Paloma is killed, she that's a femicide. Someone killed her because, you know, she's a trans woman, a queer woman, a mushe, and that is still something, a recipient of violence, of course. And that's the thing that brings together Feliciana and Zoe, the journalist. But let's say that is one thing, and you can that was a fact, but I didn't really know how was I getting there, or where I was getting to. I think it's always more about the process. So the other day someone asked, like, how can you write about this femicide or femicides? Because I also work in a newspaper, and I write about a lot of these subjects. And someone asked me, like, how do you keep yourself sane, or how do you write about these things? And I realized the other day that it's exactly this. It's more about the process. I really enjoy thinking, and it's always doesn't, how to say this, like, doesn't really matter what I'm writing about. I mean, it does matter a lot, with all the respect that means or implies, but it's more about doing it, what I enjoy, and I get so writing this whole process, I'm really very happy right now talking about this, because it was a very interesting, compelling, it was a great process, like thinking all this, feeling all this, going through all this through words, and in that space of total freedom, no, where you can really go wherever the story is taking you, or wherever the character wants to go. And yes, I did had like certain points that I wanted to think about, or certain questions, but again, sometimes the best questions bring you more questions more than answers, right? So I think stories also work like that, like more than getting you to a place like an epiphany or an eureka, you get another question, like, even, I don't know, like makes you feel even more anguish, no? Like, oh my goodness, now this other biggest question is coming out of this. So I think that writing has a lot to do with that. And of course, Paloma. So Feliciana is, of course, a very wise woman, and she's an old woman, and she knows everything. And of course, is a serious character, because knowledge has that. It's a very, it's a serious thing being being like that and having all that knowledge. And so she's a wise woman, but I thought, like, it's like party and the lighter part of life is also important, no? And laughing, and sense of humor and everything. So in that way, Paloma was like a counterpart, a very important counterpart in Feliciana's story. So while Feliciana is getting to deep things about life and important matters in life, Paloma, I pictured her of course, all proportion kept. But I love these Almodovar characters, these queer Almodovar characters that come like they enter the scene and they say something that makes you laugh a lot, and they're so cheerful and lovable and, you know, light, and that very heavy scenes or very heavy stories, in that moment they suddenly lighten up, and I don't know, he transforms stories with these characters in a very amazing way, I think. So of course all proportion kept. I was thinking of something like this, like with this very serious character, what happens if someone, the closest person to this curandera is someone who's thinking about the party, and that all these foreigners coming to Mexico are super handsome and wants to go to bed with everyone and have party and drink mezcal, and what happens in that combination and that chemistry between, you know, their own conversation, because phrases change as chemicals, no? When one is very light and the other is very deep or very wise, or so what happens there, no? And I wanted to experiment that, someone thinking more about the party and all the joys and pleasures of life, and all the laughter, and he when he's a he and she when she's a she. when Paloma says things to this very dense or very wise moments where Feliciana appears. So yeah, that was in a way. And by the other hand, in the other story, Zoe, who's a journalist and also, let's say, a serious person, she's working in a newspaper, and she has a very traditional family, but she also has a sister, a younger sister, that has been, well, that is gay, and that she has always been, let's say, like a mess, and she burned her high school trash cans because something unfair was happening there. And I don't know, I think she also is an important character in that way, because I wanted these two main characters to have their counterparts that are lighter and that are more, yeah, let's say, to the lighter parts and to the more irrational, the more the funnier and sunnier parts of life, let's say. So how do they all, these four stories, again, how do they interact, they intertwine? What happens if the same situation happens to both part of the stories, and what happens when these two persons talk about that, those things? So yeah, it was more like having fun with these characters than other thing.
And it all sort of leads to more questions, which we said, you know, like and that is sort of what comes out of the structure of the story too, having Feliciana tell her story. So the idea of thinking that if someone's telling you their story, you're going to have questions. You want to engage. Well, if it's told well, and if it's written well, which this one is, you will have questions. You will want to engage with them, and ask more questions. And I also don't think that it would be a spoiler to read the end, a little bit from the end. So once Feliciana is sort of finishing telling her story to Zoe, like, it is then similar to when you're researching or writing stories for the newspaper, you get to the end of finding the story, and then you write it. And that's sort of similar to the end of Feliciana's story. So I'm going to read a little bit from the end. Tell your story and tell mine, because they are not two stories, but one. This is why I asked you over and over about yours. Say your name, or say my name, or say both. Your name is mine, and they are the same, because high and low, we are all the same. It doesn't matter what name you say, yours or mine, because we are all children of the language. We all come from the language, and when we die, we return to it. Just like Paloma is here with me every day, talking to me the way she talked. She is my language now. She is here with me as I speak to you. She speaks to you through my words. You visited your deep waters, and you saw that your deep waters tell you not what your name is, but why your name is yours. They tell you, this voice is yours. Your deep waters tell you, here is where I begin and where the others end, because here is where your language begins, the language that belongs to you and no one else, the one you will now write.
Now I got very emotional and excited. Thank you for
I know, and
reading that.
I loved that so much, because it asks a question, but it also offers, it feels like an opportunity, and it's Feliciana telling Zoe to now go write the story. This is why I told you the story, because now you will write it, and it will offer you questions for you to answer. But it very much felt like an opportunity for whoever will be reading this book to go find their own language, or find the language and let it speak to them, and ask it questions and figure out what that story is. And that's such a beautiful opportunity, and I really loved
Isn't it
that sort of.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, not sorry. Please finish what you were going to say.
I was just going to say again and again that I loved it.
Well, hearing this now makes me think how beautiful language is, that like how can it be possible, like let's say someone who has died and we loved a lot, like my grandparents, for example, that I really loved, and I think we have all lost something, and or someone that we really love, and they live in the way we speak and the way we tell stories, and how everything, like I think language is this very weird, like matrix sort of, multiverse, where everything we have been and everything we had said and lived is material, like takes its own presence, its own weight through our words, or in our words. So yes, like all past, present, and future can be, of course, in our language, and all the people we have met and many of the stories that conform ourselves live there. So I think that language is it has its own nature and its own beauty, like it's of course like a living thing, like something that's of course an extension not only of us, but people we have loved, people we have lost, things we have lost. There's this very, when I was a teenager, I read this Julio Cortázar short story that I really like, that it's a very simple and anecdote, and it's a very short story about a man who suddenly loses his glasses, and he has the need of telling the story of why he lost the sunglasses, not the sunglasses, the glasses, to read. And well, so it is a very simple anecdote, but I think there's a great premise there. No, we always, like, language fills the void of all the things that had happened, and every time like something tiny changes our daily life, we have the need to call someone we love and tell them the story. And you know what, I lost my glasses. Oh, Jesus Christ, why this happened again, or whatever. No, so even in the very small things and the bigger things, like we lost, let's say, I don't know, something, or someone. No, we have the need of, like, language is that also, that void. And again, it's not a void. Language has its own weight and its own material. Language being a material itself, of course, that's the same material that you use in an Uber or in a novel, or in, no, apart from the other arts where you use other materials to do the art, let's say, like, I don't know, photography, art, music, or any of the other arts. Literature has this, no, it's a daily life material that we use for everything. And again, it's the same material that contains all what we have been and all that we will be also. No, if we look at closer, there's also the seeds in what we say of many of the things we will be. And from a political perspective, of course, that's a narrative also. And what we say and how we name things has to do a lot with how we deconstruct many things that we need to deconstruct in our societies. No, all these violent practices, racism, patriarchy, many of this. Things that are not concepts, of course, that have implications in reality. No, but that's again language. How we tell a story, how we say things, how we name things. No, so yeah, I think this just made me think about, of course, the beauty. Of course, again, the power. I don't know why I said this word so many times. I don't really. I mean, I'm not obsessed with this. It might seem like. It's just one of the aspects, no, that I think it's important to think about. But again, language gives you that very noble opportunity, to rethink, to change even a trauma, in a very specific point of your life, can be changed just with words. And I say just because it's as simple as that, like as retelling a story, how we say things, how we name things. I don't know. I'm a writer, so I think I'm very focused, of course, on that. But I also believe in the in the importance that language has from that political perspective, and how we tell stories and how we name things. Yeah.
And then before we wrap up, I want to ask you what questions you hope, a two-part question. What questions you hope people ask themselves and others after reading this book? And then the second question is, what questions did, if there were any, did you, or came to you sort of while you were writing, that you didn't really get to answer? Okay. So that you didn't get to answer in this book, or they didn't quite fit, but they're ones that you want to keep thinking about or answering.
Oh, wow. Great questions. I'm writing them down to have them here present. Okay. So thank you, Nat. They're very good questions. So which questions I would like readers to ask themselves? It is a very difficult question. I think that actually I would be more interested in knowing what the questions come to someone who reads my book as more as a conversation than than me sharing something. I think there's more to learn than to say. My best friend will tell you that that's because I'm a Gemini. I always think like that or say things like that. But yes, I think I have more to learn than to say. And of course, also writing is a way of learning. And what something that you write says to another person or mirrors in another person, it's something that I'm really curious about. So now that the book is coming out in the States next week, I'm really curious about to know more about this. So actually, yeah, my more honest answer would be I'm curious about what you're saying too. Like, I would like to know that, and to be able to have a conversation about those questions, of course. And the second part of the question, it's very interesting because I would say they are it's tricky because when you close a story or you close a book and it's published already, I think that from in my personality, I if I have more questions or a question that came out while doing that, I will write another book, or I will write something else. Perhaps I don't write poetry, but that could be another way of processing something, or writing. I'm now exploring different forms that I know, like new forms of writing. For me, of course, ancient for history, but I'm trying to explore different ways of writing. So yes, when I would say that when I close something, I close it and that's it. It's like a friend once told me, like, when we are growing and we, on the wall, when we do these lines as we grow up, when we're children, and now this summer I grew up, I don't know, this much, and it's just like 2 fingers or something. But well, I'm a short person, so in summers that was the most I would accomplish. But yeah, I would say, as a friend we're having this conversation, that sometimes books are more like that, like, well, this tiny mark in the wall, like, oh, this is here, and it's not a matter. I mean, the metaphor is not much with growing, but with this marks of what you have been. So I've been this book, I've been these words, and that's a mark, and it's all part of life. And so next mark would be in a different space. Doesn't really mean that I'm a bigger or a better person or whatever. I hope I am a better person, actually. Not because of books, just because of life. But yes, I would say that books are sort of those marks in life, like, well, so this is it. And those questions are somehow answered or opened in that book. But then if other questions come, or something else comes up after that, that's a different moment, and that means that's also a different space for to explore it. Yeah, so that would be my answer.
A different mark on the wall.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, I am so excited to continue to see those marks on the wall and see those other questions that you ask, because there are so many more that came up while reading this. It was such a lovely book, and I'm so excited for people to get it. When this episode comes out, it will be available for them to buy at SKYLIT Books or on our website. And thank you again to Brenda Lozano for taking the time to chat with me today about her new novel, Witches.
Thank you so much, Nat. I'm very, very happy to be here with you at SKYLIT. Thank you for the invitation to the podcast.
Thank you for listening to the SKYLIT Books podcast series. Please don't forget to visit our website at skylitbooks.com and make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast for more author talks and bookseller conversations. You can find us on Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. Stay safe and healthy, and we hope to see you back in our store soon.